What's up, party people? Wow, wow. All right, hey, listen, I got to get right to it because this is a pretty epic video, and honestly, 2023 is moving fast. So this whole idea of reminiscing about 2022, I think I'm a little late to the party. But everybody out there has already kind of done their, here's my year in review, here are my top favorite books, and yada yada. I'm just going to do this a little bit differently. I want to do my top 20 authors for 2022. And the reason is because I read a lot of books by a number of different authors, and some of them were phenomenal. So rather than just reduce or pick one book, I'm gonna just kind of chunk it all together under the author. So, and I'll try to do this in a chronological fashion, but I'm pretty sure I muddied things up. It's not going to be as perfect as I'd like, and I'm super neurotic. I mean, let me just say it like this, have you ever gone to like get your hearing checked, and they're like, raise your hand on which ear you hear the small little bing. I'm thinking to myself, did I just hear a bing? It was really silent. Maybe that was, or maybe that's just my ears ringing. And then which ear was it? Was my left? So I can't even make a decision about which ear they're literally putting sounds into. Nor can I do that with my glasses, Can you read the top line? Well, maybe I can. I'm pretty good at guessing. I'm pretty sure that's an E, but it could be a B. I'm not 100% sure. Do you understand what I'm saying? So, to come up with the top 20 books that I feel like for 2022, I mean, that's ridiculous. This list would change for the most part over and over again. The list of the books and the authors, they're pretty good. I mean, so do you get what I'm saying? I'm not even sure I get what I'm saying, but let's just kind of move on. Let's see what happens. So for 2022, for the small masses that would be interested in this video, here are 20 authors and some of their works that I read and I love. Now, this is also important. I try to read a lot of different authors throughout the year, but I am a creature of habit, so I have this tendency, once I like an author, to just kind of stay there. And so I really have to kind of force myself sometimes to try something new. The benefit this year has been, I found BookTube. I mean, I didn't even know that thing was happening. And, basically I bought more books probably in 2022 than I have in my life. Now, that's not true. My library is pretty big, but I don't want to brag. Okay, so anyway, I'm just going to jump right in, and I'm going to go from 20 down to number one, like the number one author that I loved for 2022. Some of these are familiar, and a lot of these will be different for you. So that'll be special. Coming in at 20. Coming in at number 20 for 2022 is an author, honestly, that is just in a whole different genre, and to be honest, is a standalone, would be number one in his field, and that is a guy named Jacques Philippe. And this is a spiritual writer, so it has nothing to do with fantasy or sci-fi, which is what I predominantly seem to read. I like reading books like that, and Jacques Philippe is my number one go-to guy. And I reread again his book, Searching for and Maintaining Peace. And then I also read The 8 Doors of the Kingdom, which is kind of a book centered on the Beatitudes. So I honestly have read everything I think that Jacques Philippe has put out, except for maybe he has 2 that recently had come out, and I'm on it, I love his stuff. And so even though he's number 20 on this list, I just think in terms of the mass appeal of people who are watching this video, he probably wouldn't fit into the category of, that's interesting, I'm going to go after his stuff. But for some of you who know, Jacques Philippe is a legend in his field. In terms of writings, he's the go-to guy for so many people. And that book, Searching for and Maintaining Peace, we did a book study on that, my wife and I, and it's just... it's a classic. So that's number 20. Number 19. Michael O'Brien, Sophie's House. And again, this is another author who writes fiction, but he is, very interested in putting philosophy and religion into his stories, and he's Catholic, so that's going to be the kind of the tone and tenor. It's really good because it deals with the World War II time period, and it looks at a young Jewish boy who is obviously, hiding and trying to survive, and this bookstore owner who takes him in and protects and cares for him. It's a fascinating story based on obviously real events. So it's kind of historical fiction, but because of the way O'Brien writes, it's not your traditional historical fiction. I mean, he's really going to try to play with ideas of why we're here, meaning and purpose, the role of religion, stuff like that. What do you do when you find yourself in horrific circumstances, and what if you feel like you have these appetites that are at odds with your religious upbringing? So, I mean, O'Brien's he's a serious writer, and his books are chunky. So here's a pic. No, here's actually the book, Sophia House. Sophia House. So Sophia House by Michael O'Brien is the number 19 book on my top 20 authors. So it's really Michael D. O'Brien, and I've read probably everything by Michael O'Brien anyway. So number 20, Jacques Philippe. Number 19, Michael D. O'Brien, and this book, Sophia House. Number 18 is Travis Baldry's Legends and Lattes. I kind of felt like I did need to put this here. I liked it. It was certainly a warm, feel-good, light read that somehow or another it just kind of worked, and it worked for so many people out there in the booktube world. It's still working. People love it. It's in their top lists, and understandably so. To be honest, I was kind of waiting for the shoe to drop, that there was going to be something horrific and tragic that happened. And, while it has some story, movement and dynamics that are a little bit intense, it's nothing overwhelming, and you're kind of left feeling really great. Like, the good guys are going to win, and the bad ones are not even that terribly bad. And it's just kind of, a big home run hit for a lot of people out there, and I loved it. I did love it. I'll read everything that Baldry puts out there. Number 17 is a classic person that I love, who's usually very much in the upper echelon in terms of a list that I would make, and that's Haruki Murakami. And I read 2 books by him this year. The first was First Person Singular, and the second was South of the Border. And South of the Border, I actually have a copy of right here. This, honestly, these are not necessarily his best books. In fact, First Person Singular is a collection of short stories, but I loved it. I mean, I just loved the way that Murakami writes. And this book, I enjoyed it as well. It was very different, and I think I've already kind of mentioned this in a previous video, but I'm always going to be all in on Murakami. Number 16, Mark Lawrence's Dispel Illusion, Limited Wish, and One Word Kill. Technically speaking, the order is One Word Kill, Limited Wish, and then the third is Dispel Illusion. And actually, the third book, it really had a great payoff. It kind of made everything click in the end. So I had never read Mark Lawrence before, and I don't even necessarily think this is his most popular work. But for me, reading Mark Lawrence, I did kind of keep finding myself thinking, well, I wonder what's going to happen next. So I guess I'll jump into the next book. And then after I read it, I'm like, I'm kind of done with that for a while. But then I'd keep thinking about it, and I'd be like, okay, I wonder what's going to happen next. And so each time I jumped into it, I felt like, yes, I'm reminded of what happened previously, and then I'm taken somewhere different, and it has a great payoff. Each book does. But that culmination, that third book, I think did have a good, satisfying ending. And this is the Impossible Time series. And for those of you who have not tried it yet, it might be good, especially if you enjoy, kind of those a little bit of time travel dimensions, and what would happen if you could try to fix a wrong, thinking of a number of books with that motif and theme anyways, that trope. All right, so number 15, is Joe Abercrombie's Half a King. The Shattered Sea series, I've just read this one. I'm in the second one right now, and I'm loving it. So this is my first time reading Joe Abercrombie, so I didn't know what to expect. I really loved this book, actually, and honestly, this could probably be a lot higher on my list, but I'm just getting to know Abercrombie, and I think that obviously he's most known for, the First Law, and all that good stuff that's out there. But for me, I don't know why I picked this. Maybe because it was a little less known or less talked about, and I wanted to try something a little off the beaten path, and I'm really glad that I did. So Half a King, phenomenal. So the other two are right behind it, and I'll probably finish those out this year. All right, number 14 on my list is, and I don't have any physical copies, I've been reading this digitally, is the Cradle series by Will White. I've only read the first two, Unsold and Soulsmith, and in some ways, this was a kind of a breath of fresh air for me, because I had not read anything like that in some time. This to me was phenomenal. Like, it kind of had all the things that I really like. The level up idea is pretty cool anyways, and the whole idea of someone who's seemingly overlooked and insignificant, and then he begins to kind of click and find himself, and it's I just love the way that Will White's brain is working, and everything I've heard says that the series just gets better and better and better. So I'm on the third book now, and I'm expecting great things. Of course, for those of you who are well versed in the world of Cradle, you're like of course, get on it. It's awesome, and I am. I'm working it. Now, a new for me author is the next one, Andrew D. Meredith, and I'm a big fan already. I loved this book, Thrice. I'm just a fan of being placed into an area that I'm not terribly familiar with. I was cheering for and rooting for the protagonists, and I found that the villains were pretty darn despicable, and I think that makes for some incredible writing. But I'm super pumped because this year I'm jumping into the Collation series, and I do think that for me, that Meredith is going to be one of those authors that just flies up the list for me next year, that he's going to be in my top few, because partly because I just think that he writes in a way that automatically kind of draws me in. I think he's kind of a unique voice that is just really resonating with me. So kind of excited about that. Coming in at number 12, I just love this book. And a lot of people are loving this book, A.R. Witham's A Legend of Blackjack. And A.R. Witham, I just can't wait. He just came out with his little novella. I'm going to check that out as well. And the truth is, what I feel like is that I could read this book with my entire family and that they would love it. And how rare that is? That's almost impossible. It kind of reminds me a little bit of the Narnia series, where you could read that whole series to your family, and you yourself, even as an adult, get so much out of it. Or The Hobbit, for that matter. And while maybe sometimes some of this is seemingly pigeonholed into potentially young adult, I just think it works for RA, regular adults, as well. And so, if you've not read this, it's a cool little portal fantasy, and I think the storytelling is fantastic, and you've got this young little character, Jack, who's coming into his own amidst great opposition and obstacles. And you just find yourself cheering for the people you're supposed to cheer for, and frustrated and aching with the reality of their circumstances, and you're irritated and upset with the bad. What I did think was kind of cool about this is that when you think that something is bad, then all of a sudden you're reminded, oh wait, there's other things that are even more bad, bigger obstacles, bigger things that he's going to have to kind of navigate through. And again, I probably pale in comparison to the amount of people who have already reviewed this, but everybody that I have referred this book to and who's read it has messaged me back saying, thank you so much for recommending that book. It was phenomenal. So all of the people out there that I've done work with in the past, you're looking for something great for you, for your family, this is going to work. It's going to be awesome. Number 11, and I don't have the book here, but it's my first dive into Christopher Racchio, his Sun Eater series, Tales of the Sun Eater Volume 1. So I read it was a collection of short stories. I'm still thinking about it. That's the thing about this. Like, at first I would think this is not going to really be, how do I even know? I know that everybody loves Christopher Racchio, and I think from me watching some of the videos of him interacting, interviewed, and kind kind of him talking about things. I know I'm going to love his stuff. But, I hadn't read it yet. So when I read this collection of short stories, I thought, I don't know. I mean, how much can I get from this that I'm going to like? And immediately, he had me in that world, in that place. And I just want more. And the thing about this book is that it gets better the longer I'm thinking about it and talking about it. And all I want to do is just kind of dive into it. That's this year's read is the Sun Eater series. So I'll be diving into those very quickly. It says a lot for me when I can read a short story collection and I'm like super invested in that. Nobody cares or really knows, but my undergrad was in English literature, and one of the areas that I kind of excelled in would be just analysis of a particular author's work. So I would just read their work, and then through just that kind of immersion into their works, I could probably put forth a pretty good synthesis of what their primary themes are. And I think what I'm loving so far about Christopher Rocchio in that volume is that you're just kind of invited into the potential of what's going to happen within the world that he's created and the worlds that are unfolding. So I'm already a big fan. It resonates with me. And I think that a really great writer knows that it's not easy to just write short stories. Sometimes it's harder to write short stories. And I think that Rocchio's a master at his craft. And so I'm all in. Number 10. And I hesitated to put this here, but whatever. And partly I read this early on in 2022. I had never read Ken Follett before, and he's known for just some legendary series already. And I thought, well, I'll give it a go. And I was hooked. And so this really just explores the idea of what would happen if, like, what would it take for, us to get to a point of nuclear holocaust, that kind of happy-go-lucky book. And I thought I loved it. And you're left at the end thinking, like, this is so unfortunately so close to reality. It's terrifying. And I think as a writer, he does an outstanding job. I'm not sure if that book, for me, will stay in the top 10, that kind of idea. I think that some of the other books I've already mentioned would replace it. But for me, at least right now, that's where I'm at with that. Number 9, there's no way this list is going to happen without me talking about the Nightmare Land series by Daniel Barnett. This is just crazy. I mean, it's if you've not tuned into BookTube, then this would be new. But most of you are probably watching the same things I'm watching out there, and everybody is in love with, and rightly so, the Nightmare Land Chronicles. I'm on the last of that first series of books that are in play, and it's phenomenal. Nightfall, Lullaby, Sleepwalking, the Flashlighters, and City of Blood. I've already read those. By the way, this is not a family-friendly, let's bring the small children around us and have a comforting, enjoyable, happy read. This is the sun is gone and you're surviving. But is the sun gone? And what the crap's going on with the nightmares? And I mean, just that first book alone, there's some scenes in there that I'm pretty sure I'm going to need therapy. That's all I'm going to say. Daniel Barnett, crushing it, number 9. And then now I don't have any of this guy's books yet. I've read them all on my e-reader, and that's J.C.M. Burns' The Hybrid Helix series. I love this guy's stuff. It's that simple. Yes, okay, superhero and space and stuff, but it's so much more than that. And this book, again, I think these books I've read, Wistful Ascending and Return of the Griffin, I'm getting ready to start the 3rd installment. The truth is, they just get better and better, I think. And personally, I think that the character development is awesome to watch. And so I'm all in. At this point in the game, he could probably write down his grocery store list, and I'd probably be like, oh, that's fascinating. J.C.M. Byrne, I just think he's the kind of author who's getting better and better. And he figured out, I think, what is clicking. And I'm loving this. So those who know, it's so good, and you're in for an amazing ride. That's what I'll say. Number 7, which is kind of a funny. I hesitated again about this. I'm not 100% sure. I read this early in 2022. The Storied Life of A.J. Fikry. I love this book. When my mother came to visit, I was like, you got to read this book. And she didn't love it as much as I did. But I just loved this. It was a warm, feel-good story about this little bookstore owner. And my great infatuation and desires one day I would own my own bookstore. And this, I think that Gabrielle Zevin, I don't know if I got that right, but I think she's a phenomenal writer. And she just came out with a new book called Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, which I'm hoping to read soon. If it's anything like this, she's going to be, a regular favorite for me. Yes, and I had a little bit of a, kind of warm feel-good scenario, and there's a young child that's going to be involved that needs to be, whatever, cared for and blah, blah, blah. And I love it. That kind of stuff works for me now and then, so I'm a big fan. That's probably why, in some ways, I like Legends and Lattes. It's not like some sort of huge, insane crisis scenario. You're just kind of in the rhythm of a bookstore. I love that stuff, or the rhythm of a coffee store, So number six is I have the physical book of the second Nicholas Ames, The Kings of the Wild. Now this is number 2 book, Bloody Roads, which I'm hoping to tackle this year. But Nicholas Ames is, but I think that Kings of the Wild is outstanding. Like Nicholas Ames, if that's a small taste of his writing style, and a lot of people say that Kings of the Wild is a lot better than Bloody Rose, but whatever. I mean, to me, partly, I get that, and it would be weird to me if you're just repeating the same old thing. It's called Dungeon Crawler Carl, that series. I like that for what that is. So you want to have almost like the repeat of that every time to a degree. You're just leveling up and you got to survive. Okay, that's great. So I'm happy that he didn't try to do the exact same thing for Kings of the Wild, because I think for the longevity's sake, you have to have some diversity. Yes, you keep kind of some of your similar kind of flows, but you have to have some story development, character development. And I do think that, I'm curious to see what would happen, if you were to bring them into the picture again, but I'm okay with him exploring maybe a new band, a new group, and we'll see what happens. So I'm going to give Bloody Rose a go this year, but man, Kings of the Wild, I couldn't, I got that for a family member for Christmas. I just thought, this book is so good. It's just right on the money. Number 5, this is some serious good stuff right here. Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. The writing is outstanding. The story idea is not necessarily anything novel, but it is so well done. And you can tell a difference between the way that she's writing a story and the way that some of these other kind of fast, post-apocalyptic kind of survival books that are out there. And I like that genre, so I'm okay with, but even some that are not amazingly well done. But I think from a writing standpoint, she's a serious writer, and this is so good. Surprisingly good, and I'm planning to read pretty much everything she's written, so there's a couple I have in my library I'm going to jump into. The last 4 are mostly, recognizable names, maybe a little surprise here and there. Number 4 is, of course, going to be Brandon Sanderson, and he could have gone up a little bit higher. I read the first book in the, Mistborn series, which it was incredible, obviously. I mean, again, I'm late to the game on that. I finished the second Words of Radiance. This was unbelievable. And then, I read a few others of his, The Emperor's Soul. And in fact, I think for me, I read 1, 2, 3, maybe 5 books, Legion, Edge Dancer. I mean, so I got a good dose of Sanderson in 2022, and there wasn't, maybe Legion was the least for me enjoyable, but that was a little bit more YA, and I'm all in. So he can, again, he could do his little grocery store list, and I'd probably be interested in that too. Number 3, I don't actually have the book in hand. I'm not sure where it's at, but it's called Tender is the Land by William Kent Kruger. At the end of 2021, I read Ordinary Grace, and this book, like literally, it was a gut punch. It was so amazing. In fact, I read this in June of 2021, so midway through. Well, then in 2022, I read This Tender Land. That book and this book are probably 2 of the better books I've ever read. These couple books are standalones, and I just think it's so good. Number 2 is Stephen King. I read 3 books by Stephen King last year. Dolores Claiborne, that would come in 3rd. The Dead Zone, that'd come in 2nd, and the best of the Kings I read last year was Revival. The Dead Zone, this is an older book. I think it holds up phenomenally well. The idea, the premise, so good. The ending, I enjoyed a lot. And sometimes you wonder, sometimes King can nail an ending and sometimes maybe not. But I loved it. I thought it was awesome. Dolores Claiborne, I actually didn't enjoy this at first, but the more I was reading it, the more I loved it. And I thought it was phenomenal. And then, of course, Revival, which shocked me. I had a lot of weird preconceived ideas about what I thought this was going to be like. It wasn't like it at all. It was so good. It was insane. And then number one, the best book I read for this last year, author-wise, was by Rob Wilkins, and it was the official biography on Terry Pratchett. Terry Pratchett, A Life with Footnotes. I was so surprised by this biography. It was so well done. I'm still in love with that book. And hopefully I'm going to get a copy of it at some point here. If you at all remotely, enjoy Terry Pratchett, that book is legit. It's money. But I think just even beyond if you like his stuff or not, he's such a major contributor to the science fiction fantasy world that his story matters. Like, it's so good. And part of the reason I think it's so profound is, yes, of course, he created the Discworld series. He has a number of books that are, children's books that are loved. But the way that he handled and allowed the public to be a part of his sickness with Alzheimer's, that variable of Alzheimer's, I mean, that's some legendary stuff. And he had a lot of obstacles and things that he had to go through and get over anyways. And I just the more I've learned about him as a person, the more fascinated I've become. And I do love his zany, witty writing style. But even if you didn't, this book is legit. It's so well done. And knowing the author, Rob Wilkins, was Pratchett's personal assistant and is in a regular, of course, discourse with the family members and is a lover, of course, of Pratchett's work. I mean, you get all of it. You get kind of the fan perspective, the inside scoop perspective. You get the reality of what was Pratchett really like. You get, kind of these personal quirky stories, the adventure, the history, and I'm probably gonna read this again. So, long and the short of it is, those are my top 20 authors that I'm loving for 2022. Honorable mention is Pierce Brown. I read the first in the Red Rising series. I don't know where I would put this. This is so good, but what I've heard is that the series just gets better. So I think I'll be able to put him in, near, the upper, part of the tier of the list for the next year. I know this is kind of a long video, but personally, whatever. I don't care. I'm doing this in a lot of ways just because I love this stuff, and I hope you do too. For those of you who are interested, of course, you can check out my Discord. There's the Amazon wish list. I would love for you to check that out. And honestly, there's some other stuff that you can look at as well in that in the comments below. Tell me what you're reading. What were some of the best books that you read for 2022? What are you looking forward to for 2023? We're off and running. I've already read a number of amazing books so far, but you know what? This year is gonna have some great stuff. So I'll see you soon.